Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day, everyone. So, in this opportunity, I will be explaining about the basics of CSS through this walkthrough. Alright, so let's start with how can we add CSS into our HTML file. Right, so there are three main ways to insert CSS into our HTML file. The first one being the external CSS, second one is internal CSS, and the third one is inline CSS. So, for the first one, for the external CSS, we're creating a new file that only consists of the CSS types, so that later we can link the CSS file into our HTML file. As you can see here, within the mystyle.css, it has the property of the background color as the light blue for the body, and for the heading one, the color is navy and the margin is 20 pixels to the left. All right, that's right. As you can see here, the background color for the body is blue. And then for our heading one, we have this margin to the left of 20 pixel and then the color of navy. Right. Next up, for the internal CSS. So here, instead of creating a new file for our CSS, we are directly embedding our CSS within the style in the head of the HTML. Alright, that's right. As you can see here, within the style, the body has the background color of linen, which is like red, sort of white to red. And then the heading one, we have the maroon color with the left margin of 40 pixel. So let's try to change the background color to, let's say, blue. And then right, as you can see here, it changed. And for the heading, we can change the color into yellow and run it. It changed. That's it for the internal CSS. Next up, we have the inline CSS. So the inline CSS is typically used to apply a unique style for a single element instead of like a whole elements that we have previously taught in the external CSS and the internal CSS. So let's try it. As you can see here, the style is applied directly within the element, like the heading one and the paragraph. So let's say I'm going to add a color for, we're going to change the color of our heading one into red. As you can see, it changed into red, and then the paragraph color will return into yellow. All right. So, and then we can also apply multiple style sheets. So if some properties have been defined for the same selector in different style sheet, the value from the last read style sheet will be used. So basically, it is the HTML applying styles for in the last read style sheet that it's been used. So like here, assume that an external style sheet has the following style for the h1 element. So we have a different sheet, different file for the heading one with the color of navy. And then within our HTML file, we have the heading one color property as the orange. And then if the internal style is defined after the link to the external style sheet, the h1 element will be orange. Why? Because as I have stated earlier, that the value from the last read style will be used. That's right. As you can see, the heading is orange despite of our my style CSS has the navy color. However, if the internal style is defined before the link to the external style sheet, the heading one elements will be navy. Let's see. As you can see, the style. Here we have the h1 first, and then the link to our CSS file as following the h1. So in this case, the h1 will turn into blue, the navy, I mean, because it's using the last link style. So the cascading order. What style will be used when there is more than one style specified for an HTML element? So here we have three that is ranked respectively from the first, second, and third. So that the strongest or the most prominent for the style will be the inline style, and then followed by the external and internal style sheets, and then the browser default. So that means that the inline style has the highest priority and will override external and internal styles and browser defaults when it's applied within our HTML file. Okay, so for the exercise, drag and drop the correct tag to include an external CSS file. So here, to include an external file, we have to link our file into our HTML file. Alright, so moving on to the CSS selector. So a CSS selector selects the HTML elements that we want to style. So usually the selectors is used within the external CSS or the internal CSS, where we put the CSS within our style in the head of our HTML. So CSS selector are used to find or select the HTML elements that we want to style. So, the CSS selectors are divided by 5 categories. The first one being the symbol selector, the combinator selector, the pseudo class selectors, pseudo element selectors, and attribute selectors. Right. So the first one is the CSS element selector. So the element selector selects HTML elements based on the element name. As you can see here, the paragraph or the P element on the page will be center aligned with the red text color. So let's see it directly. As you can see here, within our style in the HTML, we are selecting the paragraph or the P to has these properties of the text align center and the color of red. So that since we are declaring our paragraph style to be this, our following paragraphs in our HTML file will follow the styling. So that, as you can see, it turns into red and the paragraph are centered. So what if we change the color into blue? So that every single paragraph within our body will be turned into blue as well. So the next one is the CSS ID selector. So the CSS ID selector, they are utilizing ID to an HTML element to select a specific element. So the ID here has a unique property, so that the ID selector is used to select one unique element. So to select an element with the specific ID, we can use the hash character followed by the ID of the element. Alright, that's right. Here we have the ID of para1. The text align is centered and the color is red. So here, as you can see from our first paragraph, it has the ID of para1. So like it is calling this style for this element, so that the words within this paragraph element will be following the styling rules of this style. So let's try for the P. For the bottom one, it doesn't follow the rules of this styling because it does not have the ID of the para1. So what if I want to apply the ID of para1 within this element? You can see para1 and then run this code. As you can see, now the paragraph also follows our styling rules from the para1. Next up is the CSS class selector. The class selector selects HTML elements with the specific class attribute. So to select elements with the specific class, we can write a period dot character followed by the class name. So in this example, all HTML elements with class center will be red and center aligned. Let's try it. As you can see here, our center style has these properties of text align center and the color red. And also our heading 1 element as well as our paragraph also has the class of center. What if I am taking out the class the class from our paragraph element. That's right. As you can see here, when we remove the class sensor, the paragraph element does not follow the rules of the styling. And then we can also specify that one specific HTML element should be affected by a class. Okay, so in this example, only P elements with class center will be red and center aligned. So that's right. So as you can see here, so it means that the only class that can be used in the element will be the paragraph or the P. So you can see here, the paragraph will be red and center aligned. So however, what if we change the P into the H1? So previously, the H1 does not affected by our rules. So now let's try it. Right? So you can see here. Now it changed that the P does not follow the rule, and then the H1 will follow our rule because it says the H1 for the class. HTML elements can also refer to more than one class. Alright, so for the following example, the paragraph element will be styled according to class center and to class large. Alright, that's right. So you have two this styling. So the first one is the paragraph center and then the paragraph large. So you can see here, the first the H1 class center, it does not get affected. Why? Because it is heading 1 and not a paragraph, whilst these two are utilizing the paragraph. Right, so we can, let's say, I want to add a center large within the second paragraph. Let's try it. As you can see here, the both of these paragraphs will be following the rules of our styling here. We have the CSS universal selector next. So universal selector selects all HTML elements on the page. So let's try it directly. As you can see here, our universal style will have the text aligned into the center of the page, and then the color will be blue. So you can see here, the heading 1, the paragraph, and also all of these will follow the rules. Why? Even though they don't have like a class or something. Because this is a universal, meaning that all of the style within our HTML file will be affected by these styling rules. Next, we have the CSS grouping selector. So the grouping selector will select all of the HTML elements with the same style definition. So let's take a look at this. For the heading 1, heading 2, and the P elements have this same style definition. So they have the text aligned into the center and the color of red. So to make these things more efficient, we can group the selectors to make the code more readable and to minimize it. So for a group selector, separate each selector with a comma. So you can see here, the heading 1, the heading 2, and the paragraph element will be combined using a comma, so that all of these elements will have the same styling attribute. Let's say I want to add an heading 3 without the styling. Hello. So you can see here, the hello does not get affected because the styling only for the heading 1, heading 2, and the paragraph. But if we are going to add the heading 3 within the styling, so that the heading 3 will also be affected. So the exercise, which CSS selector is used to select an element with a specific ID? So for the ID, we are using the hashtag. Alright, so now we will be talking about the CSS borders. So the CSS border properties allows us to specify the style, width, and color of an element's border. So this is the example of a border of the square that is surrounding the text, and then the border for the bottom of the text, and then the rounded border, and then this is the colored border. Alright, so these are the border style of our borders that we can display. So we have the dotted, which is a dotted border. The dash is for the dashed border. The solid for a solid border. The double for the double border. For the groove, it defines a three-dimensional grooved border. And then the ridge for the ridge border, inside for inside border, outside, non-hidden, etc. So the border style property can have from 1 to 4 values, from the top border, right border, bottom border, and the left border. So here's a demonstration for different border styles. That's right. The first one, for the dot border, we have like this. This is for the dash, this is for the solid, this is for the double, this is for the groove, this is for the ridge, this is for an inset, this is for the outset, and then the hidden border will be like this. It shows like nothing, and this is a mixed border. The mix has the values of the dotted, dash, solid, double. For the exercise, which CSS property specifies the type of border to display? So to display type, we can use the border style. Alright, so next up we have the CSS margins. So margins in CSS are used to create space around elements outside of any defined borders. So as like the example here, the margins are this empty spot like surrounding the border. So the CSS margin properties are used to create space around elements outside of any defined borders. And we have these individual sides of the margins from the top, right, bottom, and left. So the margin properties can have these values like the auto, which the browser will calculate the margin itself, and then the length, we can customize how much the margin value is in pixels, centimeters, etc. And the next, we can also set the margin percentage depending on the width of the containing element, and as well as the inherit, which will specify that the margin should be inherited from the parent element. Right. So here's the example of margins from like different sides of a paragraph element. Let's try it. Okay. As you can see here, that the top margin of this element has 100 pixel, and the right is 150, the bottom is 100, and the left margin of 80. Right. So the shorten property of margin, so that to shorten the code, it is possible to specify all of the margins properties in wall property. So as you can see here, that the margin, there are 4 properties for a margin. So that if the margin property has 4 values, so we can just like conclude all of these values within one property. As you can see here. So within one property, as you can see here, we can set the top, bottom, left, and right margin of a element. Right. So, however, if the margin property has 3 values, it's meaning that the top margin has this 25 pixels, the right and left margins are 40 pixels, and the bottom is 75. So the first one is being the top, the second one is right and left, and the third one is the bottom. So you can see here that it has a top margin of 25 pixels, and the right and left has the equal margins of 50 pixels, and then the bottom is 75 pixels. Now, here's the case if the margin property has only 2 values, meaning that the first value will be the top and bottom, and the second one will be the right and left. So you can see from this example here, this step element, the bottom margin and on the top margin is 25 pixels, and the left and right margin is 50 pixels. However, if the margin has only 1 value, meaning that all top, bottom, left, and right margins are 25 pixels. As you can see here, the top, bottom, left, and right has the margin value of 25 pixels. Now, and we can also set the auto value for the margin, so that we can automatically set the margin of the horizontal center and the element within its container, so that this element then take up the specified width, and the remaining space will be split equally between the left and right margins. That's right. As you can see here, the margin will set automatically horizontally center, and then the element then will take up the specified width, and then remaining space will be split equally between the right and left margins. Next, the inherit value. So this example lets the left margin of the p class x1 element be inherited from the parent element, which is the div. That's it. As you can see here, from the px1, the margin is inherited, which meaning that it will take the margin of the div. So as you can see here, this paragraph has an inherited left margin from the div element. So here, the left margin will be valued at 100 pixel, which is taken by the div. All right. So drag and drop the correct values to set the margin: 10, top, right, bottom, and left. Okay, so just from the respected list, here the top will be the first, which is the 10, and then the right will be 20, the bottom will be 30, and the left will be 40. That's it. So now we will be talking about the CSS padding. So previously we've talked about a margin, which is the space that is created around the border, but now the padding is the space created under the border, but within the element and its border. So let's try this. Right. So this element has a padding of 70 pixels, meaning that the distance between this text and the border is 70 pixels. So the CSS padding properties are used to generate space around an element's content inside of any defined border. So we can set the full control of the padding. So the properties for the padding are the top, right, bottom, and left, as you can see here. So the values of the properties are length, which is specified in pixels, centimeters, etc., and the percentage, which is the percentage of the width of the containing element, and then the inherit, which will inherit the parent element. Okay, so the negative values are not allowed in the padding. Right, as you can see here, let's try the example. Okay, so here within our div, we have the top, right, bottom, left padding of 50 pixels, 30 pixels, 50 pixels, and 80 pixels. So here within the text, as you can see, we have the border as well, so that in the div, it will include the border and the padding. So from this text, it is separated from the border with a distance of 50 pixels on the top, and then the right of 30 pixels, the bottom of 50 pixels, and the left of 80 pixels. So in order to shorten the code, like the margins, we can also like combine all of these properties within one property. So as for the four values, meaning that similar with the margins, the top is the first, right is the second, bottom is the third, and left is the fourth. Let's try the example. As you can see here, the top is 25 pixels, the right is 50 pixels, the bottom is 75, and the left is 100 pixels. The next, we have the three values. So in the three values, meaning that the top will be the first, the sides, which is the left and right, will be the second, and the bottom will be the third. Let's take a look. As you can see here, the top padding is only 25 pixels, the right and left padding is 50 pixels, and the bottom is 75 pixels. However, if we have only two properties, meaning that the first one will be the top and bottom, and the third one will be the sides, which is the left and right paddings. As you can see here, it has the 25 pixels of the bottom and top padding, and then the right and left padding of 50 pixels. However, if a padding only has one value, meaning that all top, bottom, left, and right sides will have the same, which is here shown that each of these elements, the top, left, bottom, and right, will have 25 pixels in the padding size. Okay, so in the CSS width, property specifies the width of the element contents area. The contents area is the portion inside the padding, border, and margin of an element. So example here, the div element is given a width of 300 pixels. However, the actual width of the div element will be 350 pixels because of these paddings. You can see here. The width itself is only 300, but as you can see here from the yellow, but because we have 25 padding for all of these top, left, bottom, and right from this div, it will add 25 pixels from the sides, which is the left and right as well, which making this div looks bigger compared to the div without any paddings. So in order to prevent that from happening, we can use the box sizing property so that it will maintain the element of the actual width of it, and then if we increase the padding, the available content space will decrease. However, the total box will stay at 300 pixels. Let's try it. As you can see here, so this div is 300 pixels wide, which is like this, the distance. It is the same with the box of the blue. But in this case, the fillings or the insides of this will shrink due to the limitations of the box size. Okay, so for the exercise, circle up the color value to set the top padding of 20, right of 40, bottom, and left. Okay, so the top padding will be the first. So here's the 20 pixels, and then the right will be the second, which is 40 pixels. The bottom will be the third, which is 30 pixels, and the left will be the 50 pixels. Now we're moving on to the CSS dimensions. So in CSS, we have the height, width, and max width. So the height and width properties are used to set the height and width of an element, while the max width property is used to set the maximum width of an element. So let's try this sample. So as you can see here, the height is set to 50 pixels, width is 100%, and the border is 1 pixel solid with the color of green. Right, so this div element has a height of 50 pixels and the width of 100% from, let's say, the web page is 100%. But if we are going to change it into 70%, as you can see here, the width becomes like a 70% from the whole page. Right, so the height and width properties are used to set the height and width of an element. So the height and width properties do not include padding, border, or margins. It sets the height of or width the area inside the padding, border, and the margin of the element. So the height and width has several values, which are the auto, the length, and the percentage, the initial, and the inherit. So this is the example. All right. So as you can see here from the div, it has the height of 200 pixels and the width of 50%. So let's try to change the height into, let's say, 300 pixels. As you can see here, the height increases from 200 to 300, and set the width to 100%. And this will make the div will has a width of 100% from this page. And then we can set another height and width of another div element. As you can see here, let's say I want to change the width into 1000 pixel. Try to run it. As you can see here, it surpasses the page. So that if we want to make 100% or wider, we can use 100% instead. As you can see, we can also change the height if we think that we want to increase the height of this div element. So let's try to get a 500 pixel. As you can see here, the height is also increases. So this height and width does not include padding, border, or margins. So they only set the height or width of the area inside the padding, border, and margin of the element. For the max width, so the max width is used to set or cap the maximum width of an element. And the max width can be specified in length or in percentage, or maybe none, to make there's no maximum width. So there's a problem with div that occurs when the browser window is smaller than the width of the element. So it will result in the browser adds a horizontal scroll bar to the page. So to prevent the problem, we can use max width to improve the browser's handling of small windows. As you can see, let's try for this example. Okay, so in the div, we have set the cap or the max of the width into 500 pixels. As you can see, it does not increase because it is capped with 500 pixels. Let's remove the max width and run it. As you can see, the div is gone because it is a fixed width of 500 pixels. So no matter where we resize the page, it will still fix into the 500 pixels, which making the elements inside of the div is not visible when the page is too small. So to fix this, we can use the max width. As you can see here, the elements inside of the div will be focused inside of the div because the div has set its maximum width. So it will prevent the div to go out of the screen. So now let's talk about the CSS box model. So basically, all of the HTML elements can be considered as boxes. As you can see here in the picture, the CSS box model is essentially a box that wraps around every HTML element. It includes the content, padding, border, and margins. So the explanation will be the content is the content box where the text and the image appear, and then the padding is the empty area between the content and the border, and then the border itself is the border that goes around the padding and the content, and for the margin is the empty space that wraps around the border of the contents. Okay, here's the example. As you can see here, so it has the content, which is the text, and then the padding, this empty space under the border, and then the margin is this empty space outside of the border. So let's try to change the padding, which is 0 pixel. What will happen? What will happen is that the content will stick to the border because there's no padding, there's no empty space between the content and the border. Or let's say we will remove margin from this. As you can see here, so that means that there is no more empty space between, no more empty space outside of the border, right? So now for the width and height of an element. Here's the example. Let's see. So in this picture, we have the width of 300 pixels, 350 pixels, and the height of 263 pixels. Right. So here, as you can see, the height itself is 50 pixels. Alright, so moving on to the CSS layout, which is the position property. Right. So the position property has 5 different properties. They are static, relative, fixed, absolute, and sticky. The first one is static. So the static position is the default position of the HTML elements. So static position elements are not affected by top, bottom, left, and right properties. And the elements with the static position is not positioned in any special way. So it is always positioned according to the normal flow of the page. So here's the example. As you can see, it's like the usual position. It is not affected by any way. As you can see, just like a normal elements in the HTML. Now, in the relative position. So an element with the position relative is positioned relative to its normal position. So when we set the top, right, bottom, and left properties of a relatively positioned element, will cause it to be adjusted away from its normal position. So other content will not be adjusted to fit into any gap left by the element. Let's try the example. As you can see here, the position is relative, and the left position is set to 30 pixel. So it like move away from the left side with 30 pixel distance. Let's try to change the left into 100 pixel. As you can see, it is also changed away further into 100 pixel in distance. So for the fixed position, the element is positioned relatively into the viewport, which means that it is always stays in the same place even if the page is scrolled. So the top, the right, bottom, and left properties are used to position the element. So a fixed element does not leave a gap in the page where it would normally be located. Let's try it. As you can see here, this div element has the position of fixed. So as I said previously, it does not leave a gap in the page. As you can see, like the border directly touches the limit of the page. Instead of floating like this, it has like a slightly gap between the border of the page and the content itself. Now for the absolute position. So an element with an absolute position is positioned relatively to the nearest positioned ancestor. So however, if an absolute position element has no position ancestor, it uses the document body and moves along with the page scrolling. Here's the example. Let's try it. As you can see here, the element with the position absolute is positioned relatively into the nearest position ancestor. Next, we have the sticky position. So the element with the sticky position is positioned based on the user's scroll position. So a sticky element toggles between the relative and fixed, depending on the scroll position. So it is positioned relatively until a given offset position is met in the viewport, then it sticks in place, like this. As you can see here. That's right. So when we scroll this page, the sticky div will stick on the top of our page instead of going down as we scroll. So let's try to change the background color to red. Here it still sticks because we have this position with the sticky value on it, and the top is set to 0, meaning that when we scroll down, it will leave a 0 pixel gap on the top of the div. And with the padding and the color and border, it's just a normal padding. Okay, so let's continue. Continue to the position text in an image. So for the top left, it will look like this. You can add the text there, and then slide to the top right. Here we have the div class of top right, so we can add text into the top right of the image. Let's try to put this is an image. As you can see, we can put text on top of the image like this. Like the bottom right and center is pretty much the same. So we can say, let's I have an image. It's pretty much like that. Alright, for the exercise, what is the default value of the position property for HTML elements? So the default is static. So now we'll be talking about the CSS pseudo class. So what are pseudo classes? Pseudo class is used to define a special state of an element. So it can display an element where a user moves the mouse over it, and then style a visited and unvisited link differently, and then style an element when it gets focused, and then style valid, invalid, required, and optional form elements. So here's the example for the hover a mouse over it, and then here is for the focus, right? So the syntax for the pseudo classes is like this: we have the selector, and then the pseudo class, and then the property and the value. All right. Next, we have the anchor pseudo classes. Let's try the example. As you can see here, first we have this unvisited link. So here we have the anchor and link has the color of red, unvisited. However, I have visited this link previously, so the color is green. So let's try to change this visited link into, say, blue. As you can see, it's turned into blue. And then here we have the mouse over link, which is the hover, and the color will be hot pink. And this will be applied into this link. Let's try it. See, when I hover my cursor over it, it turns the color into a hot pink. What if I change it to orange? Now it turns into orange color. Next, we have the selected link. So here, within the selected link, it will color blue. So let's try to change it to gray because I have set the visited color into blue. Okay, let's click on it. So you can see here, the color changed into gray. Or maybe let's try to change it to red so it will be more visible. And we click on it. As you can see, it turns into red. Here. Alright. Then we can also combine the pseudo class with an HTML classes. So let's try it. As you can see here, for the anchor, we have the hover for the highlight. So when we hover our cursor into the link, which is the first link, it will change the link color into this hex code. Maybe let's try to change it into, let's say, yellow. So when we hover our cursor above this, it will change into yellow. And when we hover our cursor on top of this link, it will also change the font size into 22 pixels. Let's change this into, let's say, 100 pixels. And when we hover over it, it changed into a 100 pixel size. So the second one, it doesn't trigger this class because it does not have a class of highlight. Next, we have the example when we hover our cursor in on top of a div. So you can see here, when we hover on top of a div, we can change the background color because of this. So you can see here, the div hover background blue. When we change the background color into red for the hover, it will also change the background color into red when we hover our cursor above it. Okay, so now we can also put a tooltip within our paragraph. So let's try it. As you can see here, for the P element, we have this style. As you can see here, and when we put div hover P, so when we hover our cursor into the P element, it will display a block. As you can see here. So the block is actually a called from this, the data here I am for this hover P. Let's try to change the text. Say boom, and then the background color will be, let's say, red. Boom. Okay, so now we have the first child pseudo class. So the first child pseudo class matches a specific element that is the first child of another element. So in this example, the selector matches any paragraph element that is in the first child of any element. Let's try it. As you can see here, we have the paragraph first child and the color is blue. So here it is actually, it will style the P element that is the first child of any element. So the first child of the element P will be this, right? And this is the first child as well, because this the second line will be the second child, and then this is going to be the second child as well. Now we can match the first italic image, italic elements in all paragraph elements. Let's try this. So you can see here, so the first italic within this paragraph element is this. So the first child, so only the first will be triggered from each paragraph element. So you can see here, the first strong will has the italic element as well as the color blue. So for the next example, we can also match all of the italic element within paragraph elements that are the first child of another element. Let's take a look at this. So the first child of an italic within our paragraph element will has the class of this style. As you can see here, from our first paragraph, and within our first paragraph element, we have the first italic and then the second italic. Now, within our first paragraph, both of these italic are applying the style from this class. And same goes for our second div, which is the first paragraph element will also has two italic elements, and each of these elements has this property style of classes, while the second from the second child of the first paragraph block does not have the style format like this. Okay, so the lang pseudo class allows us to define special rules for different languages. So in this example, the lang defines two quotation marks for the queue elements with length equals no. As you can see here, some text, when we have the queue length no, it will call this quotes here. First, we have the opening tag for the queue, and then the closing tag for the queue. So within the queue tag, within the queue element, I mean, the beginning and the end will have this quotes, this symbol right here. Right. What is a CSS pseudo class used for? To define a special state of an element. Now we'll be talking about the CSS pseudo elements. So what are pseudo elements? The CSS pseudo elements is used to style specific parts of an element. So for example, it can be used to style the first letter of line, and then insert content before or after an element, and then style the markers of list items, and then style the view box behind the dialog box. So here's the syntax of a pseudo element. So first we have the selector, and then the pseudo element, and then the property and the value of the property. Right. So let's move on to try the first line pseudo element. Okay. As you can see here, the first line of this paragraph has a different styling compared to the second one. That is because we have this style that it says the first line of our paragraph will have the color of this of red, and then the font variant is the small caps. So let's try to change the color into, let's say, blue. Then the first line of our paragraph, this, will turn into blue. Right, so the first line pseudo elements can only be applied to block level elements. And then the following properties applies to the first line pseudo elements are the font properties, color, and then background, word spacing, letter spacing, text decoration, vertical align, text transform, line height, and clear. So here, the double colon notation in the first line versus this. So the double colon replaced the single colon notation for pseudo elements in CSS3. So, and then this was an attempt from W3C to distinguish between pseudo classes and pseudo elements. Okay, so now we will move on to try the first letter pseudo elements. Right here, as you can see, from our paragraph, we can change the first letter styling using this. So the first letter will have the color of red, and then the font size of extra large. So let's try to change the color into yellow, and then the font size into small. As you can see here, the first letter will become small, and then the color will turn into yellow. So here are the lists that can be applied into the first letter property pseudo element. And we can also combine the pseudo elements with our HTML classes. So here, for the example, we can combine the P element, the paragraph element, to the style. As you can see, for the P with the intro class, we'll have the first letter that is styled with the red color and the font size of 200%. Let's see here. This is an introduction has the intro class, which means the first letter here will have this style. Let's try to make our second paragraph has the same class as well. Should run it. As you can see here, the second paragraph will also inherit the styling from this one. Then we can also apply several pseudo elements within our CSS. As you can see here, let's try it. So we here can combine the first letter and the first line pseudo elements within our paragraph. As As you can see here, let's try to change our first letter color into brown and our first line color into green. As you can see here, it changed the colors, and this will be applied into our paragraph. Right, so we can also use the before pseudo element. So the before pseudo element can be used to insert some content before the content of an element. Let's try it. As you can see here, we have the h1 before, and then the content for the before is the GIF smile. There. So as you can see here, the h1 heading, for before the heading, we will have this content of a smiley GIF. And then for the after pseudo element, it works similarly with the before, but instead of putting a new image before the heading 1, we will put the image after the heading 1. Let's try it. As you can see here, the image is located after the heading instead of before. Alright, so the marker pseudo element in CSS will select the marker of a list item. So let's try to visualize this. As you can see here, we can customize the style of our marker or list using the marker pseudo element. As you can see here, we have the unlisted list of coffee, tea, and milk, and we have the ordered first, second, and third here. So if we change the color of the marker pseudo element into blue, it will also change. And then we can also change the font size for our list, let's say 100 pixels, so that it will get bigger. As you can see here, it gets bigger. Here, so now we have the selection pseudo element. So the selection pseudo element matches the portion of an element that is selected by a user. And this can be applied into selection, color, background, cursor, and outline. Let's try it. So here we have the selection, that the color, spread, and the background is yellow. So we can select some text on this page. Let's say we want to select this. Here, the selected element, the selected text will has the styling that we have declared in the selection here. What if we change the color into brown, then the background with green, for example? Let's try to run it. As you can see here, the selection also changes. For the exercise, drag and drop the correct pseudo element to insert the content before the text of an h1 element. So here we will apply before. Right now, let's talk about the CSS website layout. So as you can see here, the layout for websites are usually divided into these kind of templates. And then let's try to talk about the header now. Let's try to visualize it. As you can see here, we have the style for our header. So the background color will be the light gray, and then the padding of the header will be 20 pixels. And then the text align will be centered, so that the header text will be centered in our header. Let's try to change the padding into 50 pixels and then the color into green. As you can see here, when we add more padding, the part of the block here will be bigger, and then we can also change the background color for our header. Next, we have the navigation bar. As you can see here, first we can style the top of our navigation bar. So first we have the overflow hidden, meaning that if this text within the block is too big, that it won't be overflowing, like, so we don't have to scroll for the text, so it will automatically like hide the excess text so that it will be visible from the block. And then here's the background color for the whole bar. Let's try to change the color into orange. As you can see here, the whole bar here is changed as well. So now we can also style the top left of the links. And first we have the float left for this, and then the display for our link is a block, so that it will look like a square or rectangle. And then the color itself is, we can also change the color, let's say into yellow or maybe red. As you can see here, the text color will be red. And then text align center, so that the text within the box will be centered. And then the padding for each text will be 15 pixels and 16 pixels for the top, bottom, and left and right side. And then we have no text decoration here. Right, so now for the cursor hover, we can add style here. So when we hover our cursor into one of the blocks, the background color will change into light gray, and then the text color will change into black. Let's try to change the text color into green. As you can see here, the text color now turned into green. So now let's talk about the content layout here. Okay, as you can see here, we have 3 columns for our contents. And you can see here, it is styled like this, so that the text will float into the left, and then the width is 33.33% because we want to divide 3 contents within the 100% of our page equally. And then the padding for each content is 15 pixels. Alright, so here we have the clear, so for the clear floats after the column, and here we have the row after. So the columns here are treated, are behaved like a block by this, so that when we like minimize our page, it will going down instead of like collapsing into each other. And then it's clear both, and then the responsive layout makes the 3 columns stack on top of each other. So here our max width is 600 pixels, and for the style of the column, the width is 100%. So as you can see here, it will change as the width is set to 100%, and then the max width of the whole page is 600 pixels, so that it won't be hidden if we decided to make the page become smaller. Alright, so okay, for the unequal columns, it is common with unequal columns, so that most of the space is reserved for the main content, so that the side contents are usually smaller compared to the main content in the center. Okay, let's try this. Right, as you can see here, so we are creating 3 unequal columns, so that so first each of the columns will be floating to the left, and then the padding will be 10 pixels. For this, the left and right column are set to the width of 25%, so that this is 25, this is 25, and the main content or the middle column will have the 50% of width, so that each of these columns, when we add them all up, it's supposed to reach 100%, so that it will be optimal and equal to see. So let's try to change the column size into 10% each, and then here we can set into 80%. Try run it. As you can see here, the size gets smaller and the main contents get bigger. And then, yep, that's for the unequal column. Right, now for the footer, it's placed to the bottom of our screen. So okay, so let's try it. As you can see here, to style our footer, we can style it like somewhat similar to our header. So we can set the background color, which is light gray, and then the padding of 10 pixels, and then text align to the center. Let's try to change the background color into let's say blue. As you can see here, the background color of our footer turned into blue. Okay, so here's the example of our responsive layout that we have applied. As you can see here, when we scroll, when there are so many items within like a page, the browser can opt for us to scroll to show the whole contents within our website. And then as you can see here, the navigation bar, and then the contents, and then this is for the site contents, and then this is for the footer.